So I wake up, I walk around my house, it's a big house, there's clocks everywhere, they all say 9 a.m. I walk into the kitchen, it's a very fateful entrance. As I look in the clock in the kitchen, it says 10:30, I'm thinking, oh my God, this is a time anomaly, this is amazing. It turns out the kitchen clock had stopped. Welcome back to Movies TV Mad. You can follow me on Twitter at Movies TV Mad. Just smash the like button. If you love me, subscribe if you're new. Please have your say. A very, very, very warm welcome to Tuesday's edition of the DC Universe Daily. That was a fucking true story. I said into the intro, I'm telling you, it's a true story. Oh my God, I was so freaked out. It hasn't been the best of days at the beginning. Right now, hopefully the day gets better. But by the time we're here sharing this premiere, the day would nearly have been gone. Anyway, so hopefully it gets better. I love this movie. I love this movie. This was the first movie I ever saw. And James Gunn also loves this movie in his comic book ranking. Superman the movie is his #2 favourite comic book movie of all time. And #1 is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Now that's a very, very interesting thing to look at what this means about James Gunn's sensibilities as a writer-director and a comic book fan. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse at #1 and Superman the movie at #2. So could we make the assumption before there was a Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, Superman the movie was at #1 in his ranking? Let's make that assumption. Now, of course, this is going to make a certain fandom quite angry and kind of triggered. I might get into that subject again. I mean, can you critique the Snyderverse while loving the Snyderverse? Of course you can. I've done it. And I've spoken about before, and I might get into this again later on in the second part of the show, how it's a fandom where you can't critique. You know, you can't critique the Snyderverse because they all get very, very angry. I spoke yesterday how it's a religion to these people rather than just a bunch of movies. And if you say anything that isn't 100% complimentary, they all go for you. I mentioned John Glover yesterday. They're attacking John Glover, but old Lionel Luthor is giving as good as he gets. This is a guy who literally, you know, blew up Chloe's safe house in Smallville and had his head shaved at the same time. Of course, that's not real life. We'll talk about Smallville. But don't mess with John Glover. He's a great guy. He also said he loves Zack Snyder and he loves the cast of Man of Steel. But the echo chamber doesn't want to hear that once they get going. So what does it mean that Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse and Superman the movie are James Gunn's top 2 favourite comic book movies of all time? Well, it really isn't a surprise. I mean, for me, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is one of the best comic book movies ever made. It wouldn't be as high up in my all-time ranking as it is for James, because films are subjective. I'm not going to attack James because he's got a movie at #1. I wouldn't have it #1. That's his subjective opinion. This is how we need to have discussions in an orderly fashion. You know, we're not in the era of the Nazis when everything has to be the same and we all have to goose step, right? Everyone can have different opinions because art is subjective. And that's okay because I say so. But it does talk a lot about James Gunn's sensibilities. The fact that an animated CBM is his favourite CBM of all time says a lot about his tastes as someone who clearly loves movies, because he clearly does love movies. He's not just someone who's making this stuff. He loves this stuff as well. So you've got like a pioneering movie in terms of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, you know, pioneering, high tech, modern day technology, animation, or however they did that movie. You couldn't have made that movie in 1978. You know, I mean, technically, Superman the movie was made, they started filming it around 1976 because it took 2 years to make. That had one of the longest shoot in Hollywood history because everything mostly had to be done in camera. There were a few effects houses, but there's nothing on the level that we have today with computer-generated images. And that's another thing. That's another notch in Superman the movie's belt. They were creating techniques to make a man fly. And so when people say, oh, look at the VFX in Man of Steel, but look at the VFX in Superman the movie, your argument ends there. Because Dick Donner didn't have computer-generated images. Dick Donner didn't have the tools that Zack Snyder uses so well in his movies. No question about it. I'm a fan. Again, for the people in the back, I'm a fan of the Snyderverse. But I won't be a content creator without critiquing the stuff that I love and critiquing the stuff that I don't love in a constructive way, with evidence, with things to back them up. Some of it's subjective, some of it's just opinion, and some of it is quite factual as well. And so, I mean, look, I'm not surprised by, James Gunn's top 2 CBMs of all time, but it's clear to me the man has very good taste. So as a Superman fan who knows James Gunn's about to write and direct a Superman movie, how do I feel about his top 2 movies in this ranking? I feel even more comfortable now. Again, the Snyderverse fans are going to be like, oh no, look what he likes, a cartoon and Superman the movie. Oh my God, he's going to play the Dick Donner, John Williams theme again. He's going to do this, it's going to be funny. Because Snyderverse fans hate funny CBMs. There's a place for gags in CBMs, but they don't have to be there. You can go the Zack Snyder direction. That's something else I want to talk about either today or another time. Why is the Snyderverse so hated? I mean, I've spoken about the way Zack was treated by the studio and fans in general, but the truth is, I mean, studios treat directors really badly. I mean, Snyder got a lot of bad treatment, but we can maybe a little bit later on or in another video discuss the nuances of why Snyder is so hated. Is it fair? No. And I think this is the reason why his fans are like, all the time you say one thing that's not a compliment and then people go for you. I've been attacked. I'm part of their fucking fandom and they attack me. They will not listen to a critique of Zack Snyder, and there lies the problem. So going back to James Gunn and the 2 movies, I find this fascinating, by the way, and I think it's definitely worth a discussion. Now, either here on my live premiere, I'd love you to rank your top 3 comic book movies, not necessarily superhero movies, but the comic book movies that you love the most. What are your top 3 CBMs of all time? They don't have to be like current mainstream ones. They can be anything. Don't be embarrassed to put the things that you love, because as I've already said earlier on, it's subjective. And if I say it, it's true. We are in a safe space here of geeks and nerds, and anyone who doesn't respect that safe space can F off right now. Anyone can love what they love. Be true to yourself, not true to the cool person with 100,000 likes and followers. Doesn't matter what they think. Doesn't matter what I think, right? I think one thing. You can think totally different. And as long as you do that politely, in a subjective way, in a constructive way, we can have a good discussion. A difference of opinion, as I'm saying every day, isn't a call to war. I've had a famous director get into my DMs and tell me to F off, send me an F-bomb a couple of weeks ago. We discussed it because people today are so het up when you disagree with them. If I make a valid point, tell me why I'm wrong. Don't go into my DMs and tell me to F off because you're used to people blowing smoke up your backside. Because this is one guy that don't blow smoke up anybody's backside. I'm a straight shooter. And, a lot of people take me the wrong way. I'm actually a friendly, nice person if you meet me in the real world. But I'm all about the quote tweets. I'm very opinionated, so that makes people think I'm a certain way. I'm not that way at all. I'm just very straightforward. As you can see, I speak very concisely about my opinion, so there's no misunderstandings, so you know where I stand at this moment. But also, in a week or a day's time, as you know, if you've been following me for a while, you know I can go totally north or south and change my mind. I've said different things about James Gunn. I've, triggered about certain things, but then I've taken a step back and I'm going to have an open mind with Superman Legacy because it's a Superman movie and I love Superman and I want this to be great. And I do feel that James is a talented writer-director. I've never said anything different. The ability is there. The ability to write and direct a great Superman movie, the greatest Superman movie, the greatest CBM of all time, which Superman Legacy has to be, by the way. The evidence isn't there yet, but let's see if James, can show us, what he's capable of. Now, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is doing better box office than I ever imagined it would. This is the power of James Gunn, and this is the power of his Guardians franchise as well. And I'm happy it's doing well. I always said it would be very interesting for James how well or how badly Guardians 3 would do. It's doing very well. Whether you like James Gunn or hate James Gunn, he has made a really good film in Guardians Volume 3. It is a really, really great CBM. Not one of my favourites of all time, but a really great CBM. And that's a factual statement to make. And I think if you're shitting on it, it's just because you want to shit on James Gunn. And that's up to you. If you don't like the man, you don't like the man. If you want to hold him to account for his historical tweets, that's up to you. Me, he did it. It was wrong. I can't defend it. I will never change my mind about that, but it's done. He apologised. He can't keep on apologising for one wrong thing that he did in his life. Because everyone makes mistakes. We all do dumb shit. If you look at our historical tweets, we'll all say stupid things. I don't think everyone needs to be held account forever. Especially if they hold their hands up, don't make excuses and say, I'm sorry, which is exactly what James did. So it is very interesting when you look at his top 2 CBM rankings. I think they have very interesting choices. And like Superman the movie is a film that's shat on by Snyderverse fans a lot. They don't like the movie's sensibilities. They think that the interpretation of the movie is wrong. Clark being clumsy in the Daily Planet. Basically, it's the ultimate disguise. Who's going to think that guy's Superman, right? When he's clumsy, the performance of Christopher Reeve as Clark Kent is amazing. I'm not saying that that's the only way to do it. I like what Cavill did in BVS as Clark Kent, an intelligent, intrepid reporter, trying to do this report on Batman and the way, he's torturing criminals. And I think it was brilliant. There's different ways of doing Clark Kent. The Donald way isn't the only way. The iconic comic book way isn't the only way. But as a young boy, and Superman the movie being the first movie I ever saw, I loved it. It imprinted on me. It's the reason I love Superman, because so much love and care was put into that movie. As much love and care as Man of Steel, BVS and the Snyder Cut. Yes, of course. And so, will Superman Legacy be a carbon copy of Superman the movie? Or will it be something different? I think James is his own man. He will do his own thing, but he'll look to kind of give references to Superman the movie. Maybe even Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, his favourite movies. Film directors and writer-directors do this a lot today. They love their Easter eggs. They love their references to other things. It happens a lot these days. It's a trend today. I don't expect Superman Legacy to be a carbon copy of Superman the movie, but I do expect Superman to wear the red trunks. I believe that's what James is going to do. Now, I've been speaking about different designs in the past for the Superman costume. I've always said, why not just take a design from the comics, right? Work with a comic book artist who's done your favourite design. In terms of James Gunn, if James Gunn's got a favourite Superman comic book costume from a comic book artist from the comics, work with that artist to design that costume. I don't expect everything to be copy and pasted from the comics when they do CBMs, but we've never really used a comic book, a Superman costume from the comics. They kind of did it, I think, at the beginning of the Superman and Lois pilot, kind of from the comics. I think that's as close as we've ever got. Now, I'm someone who absolutely adores Zack Snyder's Man of Steel costume, and I think the version of that costume in Man of Steel is my favourite, and it looks pretty great on Henry in BVS as well. Now, I'm not sure if the design's a little bit different in the Snyder Cut. Obviously, it's the red and blue suit, but in black in the Snyder Cut, and obviously in the Death of Superman story, when he comes back, the Superman Lives story, he does wear a black costume. But I would like a Superman movie that looks at a version of the costume from the comics, and obviously if the artist is still living, if not, work with another artist who can mock up your favourite version of the Superman costume, James, from comic books. And I would like to actually see that. And I think that would make a lot of fans very happy. This is why I've spoken about my screenplay for a Superman movie, where we actually have a flashback to the Second World War, where Superman's wearing his Action Comics costume, his Action Comics #1 costume. And I think fans would really appreciate that. And when you're writing something, when I say I've written my own Superman screenplay, I don't mean it's been pitched or it's going to happen. I mean, I just wrote one for fun. I write lots of fan fiction. It's basically fan fiction rather than a screenplay, but it's a very long story and it goes on and on and on a bit. So I really put everything into it. I write a lot of stuff. All my favourite TV shows, all my favourite movie characters, animated characters, I've done fanfic for so many of them. I have a good time doing it. If I don't like something in a TV show or a movie, I change it in my fanfic. And I have a really, really good time doing it. I've got great ideas for a 24 revival. I've got a great idea for an Alias revival where I play a character in there as well. Of course, I want to stand there with Jenny Garner. Who wouldn't want to be on screen with Jennifer Garner? I want to be on screen with Jennifer Garner. We will have our dreams, right? Anyway, getting back to DC. So, I think when you look at a man who says that Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse and Superman the movie are his top 2 favourite CBMs, as I say, this makes me very happy and excited for the future. I like the fact that James Gunn's a writer-director who appreciates animation. One of his first projects in the DC universe is Creature Commandos. So that is very exciting. That's going to be animated. At this moment in time, it's going to stream on HBO Max. So he's going to do animation. He's going to use the same voice actors and transfer them to live action eventually as well. A really, really good, exciting idea. So in life, we can't just look to the past. We've got to look for the next chapter. And James Gunn's DC Universe is the next chapter. I'm looking forward to it. If I like it when it turns up, great. If I don't, I have to be constructively honest about what I don't like. But we will see what he does, especially with Superman. That means I still love the Snyderverse. I still love the Christopher Reeve Superman movies. I love so much DC content because just because I love one thing, it doesn't mean I'm going to be stuck in the past. I think it's very, very important to be able to move on, but always remember the building blocks of DC live action and what happened in the past. The fact that Superman the movie was my very, very first movie is very important. And, you know, when I think about, talking about James Gunn's ranking of comic book movies, I'm thinking about my own, and it's an interesting one because it changes all the time. And certainly Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse wouldn't be my top pick. It would be there somewhere. I'm not sure if it would be my top 10. It's a very difficult list, and most of it is DC, because I am DC biased. I love DC, and I think the best comic book movies are from DC and WB. I'm a big fan of Man of Steel, BVS, the Snyder Cut. They would all be my top 10. Wonder Woman, the first Wonder Woman movie, would definitely be in my top 10. At times, we've done my rankings here, and it's been #1. I think Wonder Woman, the first Wonder Woman, is like the most perfect CBM, if you ask me. Visually, but more importantly, the characterizations and emotionally. The movie is near on perfect. We can pick holes in the third act, but I'd rather not. So already I've listed 4 movies that will be in my ranking. And there's lots. I mean, Joker would have to be in my top 10 as well. Of course, Superman the movie would have to be in my top 10. You know, I don't know. I mean, like the Aquaman movie, it's a really good CBM. In my opinion, would it be in my top 10? I'm not sure. But when I see it, I have a really good time with it. It's difficult doing rankings and measuring what you love more than other things. And that's the thing today, isn't it? To talk about what's the best and what's the worst thing ever. But I think if you look at DC live action, right, even the animated TV shows and movies, I think if you look at the live action and the animation, Marvel don't get anywhere near it. In terms of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, Sony made a movie that was any better than anything that Disney's Marvel Studios did. And again, Disney has scored. You know, Disney are famous for great historical animation. And Sony made a great animated Spider-Man movie, which is probably better than every Spider-Man movie Sony have colluded with, you know, Marvel Studios and Disney to make. I think, you know, if you look at Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, you could argue it may be the best Spider-Man movie ever made. What do you think? Let me know. Zack Snyder is like a Bounty or Marmite. You either love him or you hate him. It's as simple as that. Now, I love the guy personally. I love his sensibilities as a director, but a lot of people don't. But he has got a cult following. We know that. And he's a very popular director. He's a guy who never used to say very much, a very softly spoken man. Suddenly, Zack's saying a lot of interesting things. Yesterday, he spoke about Jim Cameron wanting him to make Man of Steel totally in 3D. And Zack Snyder was very sarcastic. Yeah, Jim, I'll do that. I found that really, really funny, actually. But he's being, look, he's putting some takes out there, hot takes right now, Zack Snyder. He's spoken about why people have to try and replace the idea of hope thing. You know, he's gone on record saying the idea of hope is Henry Cavill's Superman's theme. I would agree with that. But what is it with Zack Snyder? Why do people dislike him so much? Why is there a divide? Why did Zack Snyder split the DC fandom, which he absolutely did? But what? Because if you take a glass of milk, right? Like 9 people out of 10 will say, leave the glass of milk alone. It tastes perfectly as it is. Zack Snyder comes along and says, I'm going to put some ice cream in there, and I'm going to put some chocolate sauce in there and some syrup. Oh, and some peanut butter. That'll taste nice. He stirs it up and see what it tastes like. So Zack Snyder has taken iconic DC characters and said, right, these versions of these characters are in the real world. There's an element of realism in these movies. When Superman's lifting something up in Man of Steel, he has to struggle at first because he's not used to using all his strength. It's very, very different to what we're used to. You know, when he flies sometimes, he growls like that. It's very, very different. The sensibilities of having Jonathan Kent saying maybe you should have not killed them, but let those kids on the bus die. And the whole point of Superman standing there, or Clark Kent standing there, you know, in the tornado flashback and watching his father die. And it's something that in the comics and in other movies and media, we can't see Clark Kent ever doing. But Zack Snyder's Clark Kent did do that. So when you shove the peanut butter in the milk and the chocolate sauce and stir it up just to see what it tastes like, everyone else around you is going to be very, very angry with you because they're going to say, I liked the milk. Why did you change it? And that's the thing. Now, my attitude towards that is, I have Superman the movie. I have Superman 2. I have Superman 3. I have Superman 4. I have Superman Returns. I have Smallville. I have so much Superman live action media and animated media I can go back to. So if I'm a purist, the purist side of me can watch that. So I didn't want Zack Snyder just to retread in what had already been done. But what he did was a huge leap. When you see, you know, Superman snapping Zod's neck, it's something you would never imagine seeing Superman doing. But that wasn't Zack's idea. That was David Goyer's idea. Let's not get that twisted. But these are the things that Zack Snyder brings to iconic characters, and it stirs people up. But people were angry with Zack well before Man of Steel. They were angry with Zack because of Watchmen. Alan Moore wasn't a fan of his Watchmen, and Watchmen fans, a lot of Watchmen fans, maybe not all of them, weren't happy with what he did with the movie. Now, I'm not going to sit here and detail you what Watchmen is like in the graphic novels, because I don't know. And I've only seen Watchmen, I think, once or twice, so I don't even have a good memory of the film. So I can't, my experience of Watchmen is great. I think it's a really brilliant visual movie, masterpiece. It is a masterpiece. I think Zack's movies are all masterpieces, especially visually. But I never read the comics, so I'm not a purist. So I can't tell the purists that they're wrong for being angry with Zack. It all started off so well for Zack Snyder with 300 and the zombie movie he did with James Gunn. People loved those movies. But then he got involved with graphic novels and iconic characters that were very important to the world. And as I say, once you take that milk and you go, yeah, I'll put this in it, I'll put that in it, yeah, let's see what it tastes like. Once you do that, it becomes a problem, because then everyone has an opinion what that milk should taste like. Most people want milk to taste like milk. Now, I like the results of what Zack Snyder did with his milk. I do. I think the results of Man of Steel are outstanding. I can critique it. Again, Snyderverse fans don't appreciate a critique, and that's the problem. But I will stand by what I said about the tornado sequence. And if you want to come at me, come at me. I'm 6 foot. I'm trained in martial arts. You know, I can look after myself. I ain't worried what you say and do about me. You can quote my tweets. You can, what do? They like copy the tweets so you can't see what they're doing, and they post them on Twitter. Then they make fun of you just to get the last word on you. And probably that's been done on me loads of times. I don't care. It doesn't matter. I stand by what I say. But at the end of the day, everyone has their own opinions, and it is very, very subjective. But at the end of the day, right, I like Zack Snyder. Just because I like him, it doesn't mean I'm not going to critique him. But I'll say it again. This is a fandom. This is like a religious sect. Zack Snyder is like the priest, like the god, and you always must bow to the god. And if you don't bow to the god, they will come for you. That is what, not a majority, but a minority of the Snyderverse fandom. That's what they're like. Now, you've got the normal same members of the fandom who just admire him as an artist and, enjoy it. But also there's the situation, because Zack has had so much hate, there's this element of paranoia around the fans. So anytime someone says anything, what did you just say about Zack Snyder? I'm going to get you. I'm going to go on your profile. Why are you still following me? Crap like that. So there's this understandable paranoia. I've been there in my life when I was younger, when I fan worshipped something so much, like Smallville. I was obsessed with Smallville. If anyone came for Smallville, what do you mean? But now that I'm older, 50 years old, I have a maturity about me. So I can see the positives and negatives, but this is the problem with fandom. In my early days of being a United fan in the 90s, I was very defensive about anyone criticising Manchester United. Now it just goes over my head. But if you're not careful as a fan, it becomes an echo chamber. It becomes problematic. Like elements of the Snyderverse fandom have become, and this targeting of James Gunn isn't a good look. If you don't like James Gunn, you don't have to like him. If you want to boycott his movies, boycott his movies. Clearly, none of you went to see Guardians 3, and that movie in the box office is doing very well. Thank you very much. So, I want the Snyder fans to be able to fight for Zack's DC, franchise, and to try and restore it. I don't know how possible and realistic that is, but I think they have every right to try. You're a very passionate fan base. I love Zack's DC movies. I have to keep on saying it because there's some people that are very hard of hearing. But there is a future here. And James Gunn is that future. If he makes a success of it, he remains in his position. If he fails at it, he leaves. It's as simple as that. So let's have an open mind and let's see how all of this plays out. This has been Movies TV Mad. This has been Tuesday's edition of the DC Universe Daily with me, Mick, your host with the most. Just ask your girlfriends and your wives, please like, share, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you never miss this beautiful perfection. Smash the like button. If you love me, subscribe if you're new. Please have your say. Until I see you again, goodbye, au revoir, auf Wiedersehen.